Welcome to The Next Chapter, a show about how to move your life forward and what comes next. I'm your host, Carrie Pena, co-founder of the Center for Positive Media. Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Pena, and this is The Next Chapter. In studio with me today, Tyler Tisdale. And boy, do you have a next chapter to talk about?
Yes.
The show's all about how we reinvent, recreate, build on past mistakes, and make a new life. And you've done that. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So you have a story of addiction and recovery. You are the founder of Pinnacle Peak Recovery, and I so appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Tell me about when you first became an addict.
Yeah, so I grew up in an alcoholic home. My dad was an alcoholic and drug addict. My brother experienced the same thing, and I told myself I'd never be like them. And I started experimenting in high school like a lot of us do, and I fell in love with partying. And at first it was a lot of fun, and then it turned into fun with consequences, and then it just lost control and was just consequences. What
was the partying? What were you doing?
Yeah, well, freshman year of high school, my best friend's older sister was a senior, and so we were getting invited to the senior parties, and so we were just drinking and smoking weed.
And then from there?
Then it led to cocaine and ecstasy, and then Oxycontin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we didn't know what Oxycontin was. We just thought it was, hey, it's just a pharmaceutical pill. But Oxycontin at the time, it was just pretty much like heroin in a pill. So,
what did that do to you at that time? Describe what was happening in your life now as a full-grown man looking back on that teenager in that moment.
Yeah. Well, so looking back on it and doing it throughout a lot of therapy and work that I've done, my dad left when I was 5, which caused a lot of trauma and abandonment. And so partying and all that stuff not only numbed me when I was feeling intoxicated or high from the substances, but it also kind of brought me my tribe. You know, I felt connected to other people. And with my dad leaving, you know, I was kind of seeking that connection.
Tell me about the trauma work that you've done, because I know you've done a deep dive into this and understanding that was trauma.
Right.
What you went through was trauma.
Yeah, I mean, it took time to kind of recognize it for me. I think other people, you know, just speaking broadly for everyone, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, you could recognize it. For me, I was more slowly. I did a lot of individual therapy. And even though the dialogue was around this early on, it took a while to click, I would say around like 12 to 18 months of continuous therapy, going weekly or biweekly. And yeah, it took a while for it to click.
What was the hardest part for you to accept as you worked through this?
I don't know if it was a matter of acceptance. It was just buried so deep down inside me that it just took a lot of digging to really get down to the core issue.
So you started the addiction cycle about age 15. And that came to a crashing halt at age 24 because you got arrested.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah, so I had been arrested a few times prior to this, but it was always a slap on the wrist. I'm on my way. And, you know, the consequences had really piled up to this point. And on Friday the 13th, 2012, I was arrested in Phoenix, Arizona, an hour after arriving from the Bay Area. And we were doing fraudulent cash advances at banks and across the country. And typically we would just go to the city and then go back to the Bay Area the next day. And so that was the plan for Phoenix. We just came out here and I was arrested an hour after arriving. It was 110 degrees out. I had full sleeves of, I think I was wearing a sweater at the time to hide my track marks. And I was arrested. I had no idea who Sheriff Joe Apaya was. And I found out very quickly. And I thought, you know, this time's just going to be like the rest. I'll get a slap on the wrist and be on my way. But I was indicted and spent some time in jail.
When you were put in jail and you found out like the magnitude of what was happening, what were you thinking?
Yeah, so I remember feeling so lonely and scared. And I was hearing terms like Camelback and Mesa, which are local areas to Phoenix. And I had no idea what anybody was talking about. I never heard these terms. I felt so out of place, and like I woke up from a nightmare, and I was detoxing off drugs. And I felt like I had, and if you don't know what that feels like, I felt like I had the flu with bugs crawling under my skin. Like it's an awful, with body aches. It's just an awful feeling. And this kid walked into my cell, and he was high. And I'm like, how'd you get drugs? And he put up his hand, and half his pinky was missing, and he smashed it under a bunk. It was obliterated, and it was bandaged up, and he got morphine. And like you're reacting right now, or like most people, they'd be like, get away from me, dude. Like that's crazy. But I was thinking, that's not a bad idea. I was feeling like I had the flu, and my body was hurting, and I was desperate to get high. And so I'm like, balancing it out, that pain doesn't outweigh the pain I'm feeling now. And so I was not going to do it like he did it. We called him Pinky. I'm not going to do it like Pinky did it. I'll just have my celly break my finger. And I put out my hand to my celly, and like without hesitation, he snapped my finger. And I went to the nurse's office, and I was thinking the whole time, all right, Pinky said the ambulance is going to come. I'm going to get hooked up to the morphine. And so when you're at the nurse's office, you're just in a holding tank. And so I'm sitting there thinking all these things, like I'm totally fine. I'm not feeling any pain. And I go visit the nurse, and she orders me x-rays the following week. And instead of, like any good drug addict at the time, I didn't say, well, what about the morphine? Pinky told me I'd, be going to the hospital. I was like, well, what about the pain? And she said, oh yeah, I almost forgot, and gave me Tylenol. And I was on my way back, and that was like rock bottom for me. Yeah.
Because?
Just because I woke up from this nightmare in Phoenix, Arizona, knew no one out here, had no family out here, knew no terms, just tried to break my finger to get drugs. I'm just in absolute emotional, spiritual pain, and now I'm in physical pain for my pinky. So it was very dark times.
What happened after that?
I was sick of feeling how I was feeling, and a 12-step meeting got called over the loudspeaker, and I had been to 12-step meetings before, and didn't really think it would work for me. I saw it working for other people, but I wanted to get outside of the pod, so I stood in line, went to the 12-step meeting, and there was this guy named Mike, and he was getting me excited about recovery, and he told me that, I told Mike, I said, hey, Mike, these 12 steps, the recovery, it never worked for me. He's like, we kind of analyzed what I was doing and realized that I was just going to meetings, and that's not really the meat and potatoes of the 12-step program. That's more, you just can't go to meetings. I compare it to if you have cancer, if you're just going to the support groups and you're not doing chemo, it's probably not going to work. And there's a little bit more towards the 12 steps than just going to the meetings and the support groups. And so Mike kind of explained that to me. And, I got a little ounce of hope that, maybe I can do this thing. And he told me he'd be back the following week. He was back the following week. He called my mom. He wasn't supposed to. He said he'd be there on Thanksgiving. He was there on Thanksgiving. The guy was just a man of his word. And he was the only person I had in my life at that time because I'd burned every bridge.
I can see like the emotion in you even talking about him.
Yeah.
Like, what is
the guy saved my life. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
And that really changed like your trajectory.
It did. I didn't know what I was looking at as far as prison time or jail time. And everybody in jail is like an attorney. They're like, oh, you're looking at this. Like, love breaking down charges and like telling you what you're facing. And everyone's outlook was not good for me. And my public defender told me that he could get me a year plea deal in prison. And I told him I'd take it. Everybody talked about how prison was much better than county jail, especially here. It was awful. And I didn't hear from him for a couple months. He came back to me. He's like, hey, I couldn't get you that year plea deal. And I kind of put my head down, but I just had this like thought that, hey, everything's going to work out exactly how it should. And he slammed down a piece of paper, slid it over to me. He's like, but I got you probation. And it was unbelievable. I mean, I signed the plea, and the following month I got sentenced and I was out, and Mike picked me up. I remember roaming around after I was released, roaming around downtown, and it was around Christmas time. It was on December 12th, 2012. And the Christmas lights and everything was just so stimulating because I hadn't seen lights in 5 months like that. And just the noises and everything. And I was kind of roaming around all day. And I ran into someone that was like, hey, and this had never really happened to me before. Ran into someone, oh, you just got released. You want to go get high? I'm like, for whatever reason, I was able to say no. Like, I don't. I was just like, thank God. And Mike picked me up later that day and took me to his house. And the plan was the following day I was going to go to probation and get my probation transferred back to California because I knew no one out here. I had some people that I knew in recovery from going to the meetings in the Bay Area. My family was in the Bay Area. It made no sense in my mind to stay out here. And Mike said, well, where's your own good ideas gotten you in the past? And I kind of reflected on my past and said, nowhere good. And he's like, I'll tell you what, buddy, like, this is what worked for me. I just listened to another person who had already been in recovery and already kind of took this path, and I just did what they told me. And my suggestion is you just do what I tell you to do. And I was out of my own good ideas, and my life started that day with a trash bag full of clothes that I got arrested with at Mike's house on, I want to say, University and Mill, if you're in the Phoenix area, and in Tempe. And I knew absolutely no one, and my life was so small. And from there, he got me into a halfway house, got me a job doing auto glass at a car wash, selling auto glass, and plugged into a 12-step men's meeting. And then we would take a meeting into a hospital every Friday where people couldn't come out. And so we were kind of being of service. And he just kind of got me plugged in to recovery.
And today you are super successful.
Yeah.
Both personally and professionally.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. It definitely is from where I came from. Yeah.
So tell the audience what you're doing today about the recovery work you do for others.
Yeah.
And how you've built a strong entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, definitely. So just kind of backtracking to prior to opening up my business, when I was a kid, I painted curbs on the addresses on the curbs, knock on doors. Hey, can I paint your address on the curb? Or I was window washing. I even tried to set up a babysitting business, and it was a massive failure because no one wants a guy. Like, I was like 12, 13-year-old kid. No one wants a boy babysitting. So anyways, I'd always had that entrepreneur spirit. And I told myself when I was doing auto glass at the car wash, I truly believed that I'm going to be very successful. I just need to stay sober. And I was selling auto glass at the car wash, and I would be wearing, like a button-down shirt, and I was kind of like undercover. People didn't know I was selling auto glass, and then I kind of catch them off guard. And I didn't do that like to try to fool anyone. That's just like how I dress when I went to work. And people would, and I provided such a good like service to people at the car wash, and they've typically had a negative experience that they say, "What are you doing selling auto glass? Like, you should be selling like high rises and stuff." And so I just kind of knew like I got something, and I'll be successful if I just stay sober. And so I got an opportunity to work at a treatment center doing admissions. And what an admissions person does is talk to the family on the front end and about like, all the offerings. It's kind of like a college enrollment specialist. And so I was doing that. That's how my first got my foot in the door into the recovery industry. And I did that for around a year, and I was really good at it. And I had a passion for it and loved doing it. I mean, who wouldn't in my shoes? I was a couple of years sober, and I was just talking to people about recovery. I was very passionate about recovery because my life had absolutely been saved through my experience. And I ended up meeting a guy who had a treatment center out of state that wanted to expand to Scottsdale. And I threw out a complete bluff and said, well, I'll help you. And he said, all right. And we started talking about it more and more and like kind of what that looks like. I had no idea what I was doing, but he had been through that experience. And I was just kind of the guy on the ground. And before I knew it, we had an LLC set up, a website set up. We're buying our first van. We got a location. And I mean, I was just kind of that cliche, faking it until you make it. Like, yeah.
How do you feel right now? Because you're making it. I mean, your center is doing amazing. You guys are doing such impactful work, and you're able to take those hard lessons that you learned and share them with others.
Yeah, no, it's great. Just want to be clear for my recovery, and I was taught this, is my recovery, like my work and my recovery separate. So I really make an emphasis on helping others outside of work and like continuing that. And I'm still involved with recovery very much so. So at work, it almost is it's an advantage for me to really focus on what I love to do at work. And that's more of the entrepreneur stuff. I'm the founder, CEO, so I'm very much a visionary. And so I definitely am heavily involved in recovery outside of work. But when I'm at work, I'm more on the business side of things. And a lot of people tell me when I tell them I'm in the drug and alcohol treatment industry, they're like, oh, well, there's a big need for that. Like, and there is, it's true. But I'm heavily involved in recovery outside of work because the premise of recovery and how you stay sober is helping others in an altruistic manner. So doing things for others for no profit motive. So luckily, I'm able to have a clear distinction with this, with kind of how it's set up for at work. Is outside of work, I'm heavily involved in the recovery community, working with others. But at work, I'm more on the entrepreneur side. I'm this founder, CEO, very much so a visionary. And also, you know, what we've done over the years, it didn't start like this, but what we've done is really put an emphasis on delegating and elevating. And so what that looks like is finding your strengths and what you love to do. And well, it's a 4-quadrant worksheet. So the top left quadrant is what do you love to do? What are you great at? The second quadrant's what do you like to do? What are you good at? What do you like to do? Or what don't you like to do that you're good at? And what don't you like to do that you're not good at? And so the object of the worksheet is to get everything in the top left quadrant. So you're only doing things that you love to do and that you're great at. And so I've really made a clear distinction on what that is for me. And my grandfather was an engineer. My grandmother and my mom's side are artists. So I kind of have an interesting like DNA makeup. I'm very creative, but I'm also very analytical. But what that looks like for me at work is I love strategy, I love vision, but I also love creating. And so what I do most days is work on our TikTok, work on podcasts, work on socials, just create stuff. And then I'm also very much involved with the strategy and the direction of the company.
Do you think this is what's keeping you sober?
No. Like me
what is
working?
Keeping just in general.
Oh yeah,
you
absolutely.
know, when you say these things, it's so beautiful because you found a lot of purpose that means something to you in your life.
Yeah.
And I know you have a family and a wife and all of it. So I'm just wondering, when you identify the rod, right? Like the joy rod inside you.
Yeah.
What is that keeps you sober?
Yeah. So I believe what keeps me sober is like my continuous work with other people that are struggling, like sponsoring people, which is taking them through the 12 steps. I work with new people in recovery to share my experience. So that's what keeps me sober. But what I get a lot of enjoyment out of that, but I also absolutely love going to work every day, love what I do because of that delegate and elevate stuff. I'm only doing stuff that I love to do.
Yes.
So
I think that's really powerful. So for anyone who might be listening and watching, it may not be addiction like you've gone through, but there are a lot of challenges in life.
Absolutely.
People walking through deep traumas, work stress, death of a loved one, any number of things that can take us down in life. So what do you say to people to try to turn the corner? That's what this podcast is about, right? Like, how do we have our next chapter?
Yeah.
Because I'm a firm believer that we can have one chapter and hard things can happen, but there's still more chapters to come.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. I think for me, the crux is always pain. And so pain is a good motivator for me. So these chapters that we're in, if they're tough times, it's a good launching point and segue to make a positive change from that. And for me, my perspective on things is, I got a couple points on this, but one of them is there's no difference from me and I don't want to come across like cocky or anything like that, because it's not, and it applies to everyone. There's no difference between me and Bill Gates or any other person. We're all human. And so really the difference between us is belief. Like if you think you can, you can. And so what my message to these people that are in that chapter of trying times is, if you think you can, you can. Like whatever you set your mind to, you could do it. Also, I read a really good book called The Alter Ego. And an alter ego is like Kobe Bryant had an alter ego, the Mamba. And Beyonce had her alter ego, and other famous people that we know have had their alter ego. And this guy who wrote the book actually was like a performance coach and worked with these different athletes and entertainers and actors, or even high performing business people. And so the concept of an alter ego is when you step up on your stage, whether that's at the office, whether that's Beyonce on stage or Kobe Bryant on the basketball court, you become this alter ego. And so, like I said, Kobe Bryant, the Black Mamba, I have my own, and Beyonce had hers. And I really suggest reading that book because it's great, and you can create your own. But the idea is when you step into the office or whatever your playing field is, you become this alter ego. And it's really tapping into your childhood creativity. And when you put on this alter ego, you're not you anymore. You're the alter ego. And it really like helps performance too. Yeah. So those people in that tough, trying chapter, it's like, maybe read that book, become that, create that alter ego, step into that alter ego, get out of that chapter.
Do you feel like you've made peace with what your life story has been so far?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I like my life story. I think it's a strength. Yeah.
You've embraced your whole story.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was a strength for you.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah.
Where can people find out more about the work you're doing and your recovery center?
Yeah, so it's Pinnacle Peak Recovery. You can find us online, pinnaclepeakrecovery.com. We do detox, residential, intensive outpatient, and we also have continuing care services like primary care, outpatient psych services, counseling. So all levels of care, and it's a really good program. And you can find us online, like I said. You could also find us on social media. We're on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. And our phone number is 888-AZ-REHAB.
But you're a big TikToker.
Yeah. Yeah, we have one of our core values, something I learned in EO, is like how important core values are. And so, and we hire around our core values. Our interview questions are structured around our core values to make sure we get like-minded people in our company. And we have almost 50 employees. And so all of these people align with our core values, and our quarterly reviews go over our core values. Like, how do you think you did with this core value? So one of our core values is fun. And if you ask anybody at work, that's probably the biggest core value. We have a lot of fun. And you might think that's weird for a drug and alcohol rehab to have fun.
I don't at all, actually. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, it is, because it's such serious work, and we deal with so many overdoses and deaths, and we need it.
You have to have fun.
Yeah. And so we have a ton of fun. And one of the ways we do that is through TikTok. And we do a lot of skits and lip syncs. And we started in November. We have 14,000 followers now. It's like taken off. And we have a lot of people at work involved with it. So there's like probably 10 of us out of the 50 employees that are involved in the TikTok. So yeah,
well, you're amazing. And thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
Sharing your story and just continuing to use, what you've been through to inspire others in their next chapter.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great to have you here.